Let's go to it. UFC 283, BC. As we mentioned before, this is a great card. We're going to have Anik, Felder, and Cormier on the call. I actually think that's a great booth, personally.
Dude, is that the best booth right now?
It's up there.
I mean,
it's up there.
Paul's in the conversation, but are you more of a Dom Cruz fan? Are you more of?
I will say it this way. I used to be more Dom Cruz. I'm not as much anymore. I think Felder has taken his slot from me.
Okay.
I think Felder, Anik, and
you kind of need I know people want to hate on DC style, but you need that happy presence in the. Dude, he's funny. He's funny as shit.
He brings a certain levity to the broadcast. I like him for his wrestling knowledge. Okay. Like when he's talking wrestling, I really tune in.
Well, you would admit that him and Rogan sometimes
it's too much. It sounds like the Manning cast. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yes. Like they're just.
I like having one guy who's the
right. There's nothing wrong with the Manning cast, but it's a secondary broadcast by.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like it's not you don't hear that as their primary one.
I'd like
anyway.
to see Chiesa more in that role, but that's just me editorializing.
I like Chiesa in that role as well. This will take place at the JUNESE Arena, and of course will be on pay-per-view. BC, in your main event, Glover Teixeira will be fighting Jamahal Hill for the vacant UFC light heavyweight title. It is vacant because Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz could not claim it in a bizarre kind of shitty fight that had questionable but whatever scoring. And so we're still at a point where there is no existing champion as we speak today in this weight class.
Would the real Slim Shady please stand up is what you're saying?
And right. And then they booked this one kind of like last minute as well. Because remember, Jamahal Hill was supposed to be fighting Anthony Smith. They just pulled Anthony out of that and said, we're going to give it to Glover. BC. This is a fight that I don't think a lot of people asked for. I don't think people are upset per se that Jamahal Hill has earned a good opportunity or that Glover is back.
Yeah.
But it's definitely A, the fight no one asked for, and B, I don't think the winner of this can rightfully claim to be the top light heavyweight.
No, and it's tough right now because this division's a mess, and I think this title picture and the decision making also got a little bit messy. Although I do understand the hands being tied here with that draw and with Prochazka being out now for a full year. But it's like on paper, is this a good fight? Oh, dude, this fight rules. I mean, this fight might be just action oriented, back and forth. A poor man's version, if you will, of the fireworks that Glover and Yuri gave us for the title last time. But the storyline potential is huge on a feel-good level, certainly with 43-year-old Glover now fighting in his home country for the first time since 2014 with a legitimate chance here to become a two-time champion and raise it up. Now, Luke, if we were going to predict further doom for the UFC from a bad karma standpoint, we would probably say, well, there's two scenarios that might not be great here where a champion could be crowned, but it could make it worse. What if Glover wins it, but what if it's a war and he survives it? And, in the moment he's like, I know I said I wouldn't retire right now, but I'm in my home country. You know what I mean? I don't have to fight again. They can't make me, I'm going away. Or what if the fight is just not good and Jamahal Hill wins it? And even though Jamahal Hill is on a run of 3 straight knockouts against legitimate opponents to get him into this larger conversation, did he actually earn this title shot? And would that make you feel confident like, oh yeah, the best light heavyweight in the division definitely just won it? No, it wouldn't. Wouldn't be Jamahal Hill's fault though. But I think there are ways that this bad feeling can't continue, even though this is a sneaky good matchup on paper. But I mean, outside of like Nico Montano fighting for the title that time, I don't know if I can recall a title fight like this where, like the matchup, expect to be entertained, but feel so ambivalent about, misguided. I don't know the right adjective about the title stakes and whether this, you know what I mean? Like whether the title really means, kind of like when we walked into Bisping Hendo 2, you're like, great fight, storyline, but this shouldn't be happening right now.
Yeah, especially not at 4 a.m. in London, which it took.
And then
place.
It was a wild fight, though. Let's
crazy.
give Dan Hendo credit, right?
Yeah. So I would say that, look, I don't think the winner of this can rightfully claim to be better than Vadim Nemkov. I just don't think that's true. But I will say this, it's an interesting possibility either way. If Glover reclaims the title, that would be, in some cases, almost historic and hugely, I think, validating for the kind of career he's, in the last chapter of this career that he's put together for himself. In the case of Jamahal Hill, it would be, I would say, on the feet, he is nasty and dangerous and a threat to anyone in that division. And if he were to win, though, that would be one of the more lopsided skill sets you would see for a UFC weight class champion, right?
Yes.
I mean, Khabib had a lopsided skill set, but it was so controlling, quite literally, from a physical standpoint, that he kind of get around it. Jamahal Hill, I'm not going to sit here and say he has a bad ground game, but I think he's got a limited one. I do think that's true. I think he's largely training defense right? He's not going to go on the offense except for maybe a little bit of ground and pound on top, but he's not going to pass guard, take the back. He's not threatened that way. So it'd be unusual for a weight class champ to be somewhat as lopsided as he is. But I do think they match up well. Glover is older. He can strike, but we've seen more recently he's gone back to his wrestling and his grappling when he needs to.
And if he goes all ham on the ground game here, this could get dicey for Jamahal.
And his ground and pound is terrifying. His top control is terrifying. Unlike Jamahal, he can take your back. He can threaten the pass. He can do lots of stuff on the ground. So it's almost a bit of a striker versus grappler fight in a way, which is fine and interesting. Do you think the UFC has a preference here on this?
I was going to ask you that, and I think the preference would be Teixeira. It'd be a great moment to do this in front of his home fans for sure. He's on this run of making spectacularly fun action fights, but also having the ability to still be credible in a couple of different categories, to be in spots to win, not just in the upset to win the title. But this is basically a pick 'em betting wise, right? This fight.
The odds as they were put in the rundown. Not quite. Jamahal slight favorite,
okay.
minus 130 to
so
Teixeira.
I think, because look, let's be fair though. Either way, there's a potential here that this is a transitional champion. In my opinion, I think Ankalaev gets the winner. Do you disagree with me? Ankalaev gets the winner.
Probably, yes.
And he'd be favored. And look, he also has to make some tweaks and changes. But yeah, I think it's that. But Luke, do you remember that feeling when Michael Bisping upset Luke Rockhold?
Yes.
That feeling where you felt great because we love Bisping and his story, and he finally got the validation, the Hall of Fame stamp in that moment, and also taking the fight on short notice against the guy who had dominated him. There's a lot to like there, right? But didn't you have that feeling like, great story, but the best middleweight in the world is not the champion at the moment? Do you think we have that feeling no matter who wins this fight on Saturday? And it's not a horrible feeling. It happens at times, but...
It's a good question.
Would you? Am I being wrong? Am I being too wrong about the Bisping thing? Like, I had felt like, hey, great fight against Anderson, but I thought the judges got it wrong. And then he upsets Rockhold, and you're like, man, great story, but like...
I thought that he beat Rockhold fair and square.
Yeah, well, not suggesting that.
Yeah.
No, he found his weakness and exploited it.
The thing is, Bisping had really just the right performances at just the right time, and it ended up being a bit of a feel-good story. Folks forget there were long stretches of Bisping's career where he was a villain.
Right.
So that's different than this situation.
But we always believed he could win a title, so it wasn't like oh,
that was
shit, this guy's champion.
That was the North Star.
It was just sort of like, oh, this guy's champion right now. That was more of what it was.
Yes. So in any case, it's a little bit different than I think the way you're setting it up. But I just feel like what folks should expect is whoever the winner of this is has a claim to being top 3, top 2 maybe, depending if it's Glover, I think, a little more well-rounded. And then it's on to the next to see if there's a more dominant figure. I had thought, I guess incorrectly at this point, that Ankalaev was the inevitable one, and he is not. He may end up being, but not in the way that I thought he was going to be.
Right.
So that turned out to be not quite as true as I had hoped.
But he may get a kick in the pants.
He might. Again, but I had thought he was just going to, like when John Jones took the title, I was like, dude, it's going to be a fucking while before someone takes it from him.
23 too?
Yeah. It was crazy. So, I think he was even younger than 23. But anyway, it's a fine fight, but there's nothing spectacular about it. That being said,
but hold on, just to close on this, because we were being critical there of the way it played out, and I think it's fair. I think in this case it's fair to criticize the way that they're sort of just robbing from Peter to pay Paul. Okay, you guys fight for the title now. The counter argument of what could they have done? What would be a better option given? I mean, it's a rare situation, right? So
yeah, but even that question's the wrong question. Remember, what does the UFC value above everything else? The trains leaving the station on time. They want to book dates in cities that have been planned out ahead of time. They know exactly which titles they need to be in rotation. They know exactly which shows they want to have. And it's about making sure that all of those shows, whether it's a pay-per-view, whether it's at the Apex, whether it's on the road, whether it's a fight night, whether it's on ABC, whatever it is, that it has all of its needs met. And so when they book a date and something happens or they can't quite get what they want, they will do what you call robbing Peter to pay Paul. At that point, that's the most rational decision you could make if you're operating in the UFC. But once those things happen, you're just accommodating a date. Yeah. It no longer becomes about making sure you have the best product. So,
but you can also say, did Jan and Ankalaev deserve a chance at a rematch for the vacant title?
I thought really, so, but then here's the thing: if the fight had been exciting, they might have done one. But the fight was kind of like, it's like once Ankalaev figured it out, the fight got like easy for him. It's like, well, why the fuck did you wait until the 4th to start taking this guy down?
I mean, I guess the real answer would be that it didn't need to be rushed right around the corner. Although look, Glover has
they needed
Glover
a headliner. But dude, this is remember
more
something.
about the business. Yeah,
this is the first show back in Brazil for the Ultimate Fighting Championship since the last show, which was headlined by Charles Oliveira versus Kevin Lee, which was during the pandemic. And remember, they were supposed to go to London, I think the week or two after, and that's when all the airports were closing and governments were closing and blah blah blah. This is their return since then. They had to have some kind of crown jewel on this.
Yeah, and
Glover in a title fight does that.
Now, let me frame how all Brazil this card is. There's 15 fights on this pay-per-view, which is a lot. First of all, there's a Brazilian-born fighter in every single fight, all 15. 2 of the fights have 2 Brazilian-born fighters fighting each other, and both the main event and co-main event, both of which are title fights, obviously have a Brazilian fighting for it as well. I mean, and you get Shogun's last fight, which I'm sure we'll mention, and you get certain key storylines of up-and-coming people like. Dude, this is the I guess you're right. They had to do something big, but I feel like they from just the Brazil standpoint, they accomplished that like a slam dunk.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a recent history of Brazilian greats.
It's a reminder of what a ever-present, continuing fucking powerhouse Brazil is in modern mixed martial arts.
And we get Gilbert Burns back. I mean, it's a good ass card.
The card overall is quality. The main event is fine. There's nothing wrong with it as a main event. But it's like pay-per-view worthy. It's going to suffer at the box office. Let's just be clear about that. Okay. However, BC,
you know what they could have done? Glover versus John 2 at heavyweight.
Glover versus John 2 at heavyweight. Would he want to fight? Yeah, you're not going to bring John.
Come on, that's not a bad idea. Come on.
I was at Glover John 1. John
it's
whooped
different
him.
now. It's heavyweight. It's a different Glover. Come on, because in reality,
I wouldn't hate seeing it. But if you're the UFC, it's like we're going to bring John Jones back on pay-per-view and we're going to put it in Brazil. You're not going to sell nearly as many pay-per-view buys that way. All right. So then, co-main event, UFC Flyweight Championship is up for grabs again when reigning champion Deiveson Figueiredo, who nearly quit, is defending his title for the first time since he won it back the last time against Brandon Moreno. The first quadrilogy in UFC history. There have been other ones in MMA, but this is all taking place under the UFC banner.
Am I wrong? I know UFC does not consider Ultimate Fighter season fights as real fights or exhibitions.
Yes.
But if you count those, haven't some people fought each other 4 times, or am I wrong?
Maybe that's the case. Tim Sylvia and Orlovsky fought each other 4 times, but the last of the 4 was in one.
Okay, so in terms of UFC real fights, I mean, the cool part about this, these are Figueiredo's 4 fights in succession. All 4 in a row against Moreno.
Back to back to back to back?
Yeah, I believe so. I can't be wrong on this.
I think you might be right about that.
Whereas Moreno has the Kai Kara-France fight as his last fight to get the interim title. Now, I mean, what's cool about...
Yeah, you're right. Brandon Moreno draw, Brandon Moreno loss, Brandon Moreno victory. Crazy.
So what's cool about it for Moreno is we didn't necessarily need to have him fight Kai Kara-France for the interim title. It was more, again, about a business decision by the UFC to have another title.
And he was losing it until he wasn't.
But him having earned that also kind of makes this fight even cooler because it is a unification, even though that part of it is kind of unnecessary. And it's the 4th time. And the champion Figueiredo, who had like the most unlikely victory in this series of anybody by the way that he won the 3rd fight after being 34, being a guy who we have no guarantee can make weight each time he tries out on the championship level. And he was stopped by the guy the fight before, so then he comes back and wins. I mean, that win still holds up as being so gnarly. Now he gets to fight in front of his home fans. I mean, like this. Are we putting too much pressure on them to ask for another classic?
No.
I don't think they know any other way, right?
I actually rewatched the 2nd and the 3rd one. The 2nd one to me was a classic. 3rd one to me was very good.
Okay, I was going to ask you think because the 2nd one was the most one-sided of it.
Classic in the sense that it was really fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun. The 3rd one was great. Like let's be clear. All 3 fights are great. 1 or 2 of them are maybe classics. The 3rd one to me is not a classic, but a very, very, again, I want to be super clear. It's a great fight.
Yeah.
That classic is a very high bar.
It had some tactical elements to it rather than just
the reason to me why the 3rd fight was not one is because of the adjustments that Figueiredo had made. He basically decided to dial it back a little bit. He was going to wait for the blitzing of Moreno to counter it, to tie him up, to constantly disrupt his rhythm. He was going to keep it at range. The leg kicks were huge. His overhand right landed constantly. Although I will say Moreno was able to land a left hook pretty consistently as well. They kind of rocked each other. But it was the decision by Figueiredo to slow the fight down, keep it at range, land the leg kicks, constantly move, reset, just making a guy like Moreno either blitz or just get caught looking and force consistent resets. And it was brilliant. And remember, of course, who was in Figueiredo's corner? It was Henry Cejudo, who had come up with this very, very good game plan. Super smart. Like, don't get into these scrambles with this guy. Don't waste energy. He's open for this and he's open for that. Stick to that and just apply it for 5 rounds.
John Jones is co-captain.
That's right. And he did it. It was very good. However, BC, the one thing I took away from that fight is, one, Figueiredo just doesn't defend the left hook ever, number one. And number two, you remember Figueiredo, you remember Figueiredo landing the right hand on Moreno and knocking him off of his feet a couple of times. In fact, stealing the 3rd round doing that. But it was also Moreno's power on Figueiredo that had him on chicken legs very often. Here's what I'm going to say to you, BC, true or false? In order for Brandon Moreno to win this fight, based on what we saw in the 3rd, he has to corner Figueiredo, fight him inside boxing range, and use his faster hands, crisper combinations, and very good power to put this guy on his rear end.
He also has to make the right counter chess move here in reaction to what Figueiredo did last fight. And that key, the way you said it, kind of became more of the counter puncher, make him come to you. We still need aggressive Moreno. We still need a guy who goes for finishes and makes a fight happen. But we have to see the most mature version of him. You know what I mean? I mean, like, consequently, then when you rewatch the 2nd fight, what was ultimately the key for Moreno in that one? Do you believe?
Activity, flurries, blitzes. Moving through scrambles, finishing long combinations.
But do you believe that was a? Because look, it's a gamble, Figueiredo, every time he tries to make 125.
Yes.
True or false? It is, right?
It's tough.
Do you think he was compromised the most by that potentially in that 2nd fight, or was that more?
I think he was compromised in the 3rd fight. It's not that I don't think Moreno has good power. I do think he's got good power. But Figueiredo looks fragile underneath it. And that's kind of crazy because you're like, well, he won the last one. But like, dude, I'm telling you, go back and watch. He gets his shit rattled several times. Now, it doesn't last all that long. The difference between them was Moreno would get knocked off of his feet by the power of Figueiredo. And by the way, Figueiredo has huge power for a flyweight.
And in that stripe he puts in his hair, he's a fucking badass.
It's crazy. He would knock Moreno down, but Moreno would kind of get back up and then be okay right away. But it looked a lot for the judges. The opposite kind of happened for Figueiredo. Moreno would hit him, and he kind of would just absorb it and then get a little bit loose and like he'd be a little bit wobbly and almost look more vulnerable, but he would actually never get knocked down. It was kind of interesting how they absorbed the power differently. But that tells me that weight cut fucks with his ability to take damage. There's no denying it.
Absolutely. But at the same time, it's like, are you confident he can be the exact same fighter at 135 against those killers? No.
He
kind of needs to be the big bully here.
He'd be awesome at 130. He'd be awesome at 130 if there was a weight class there.
Look, I hope, obviously we hope he makes it here and that this is less about anything like that and it's more about who can make the adjustments. And there's a lot at stake of what this rivalry can mean historically, I believe, if they come out with not just enough, like what if this is the best fight of their rivalry? Like if I asked you off the top of your head, and sometimes when I say what's the best rivalry, it's not like always who had the best fight. Sometimes it's more of think DC and John, the rivalry of it. What are the 3 best rivalries in MMA history off the top of your head?
Independent of weight class?
Yeah.
Jones, DC, let me think. So that's 1. You could argue Josh Thompson, Gilbert Melendez.
Good one. For the quality of those fights, absolutely.
You could argue that one. You could argue, how many times did they have to fight? At least 2?
Conor versus Nate?
Conor versus Nate's a great one. Someone says Tito Chuck back there.
That's
a
Long
great
Island
one.
Luke. His dad was born in Australia.
Rampage Vanderlei was a great one. I mean, I could go back. I mean,
Amanda versus Valentino. No.
Shoot to Box versus Brazilian Top Team had a shitload of them.
Eventually it'd be Rose versus
Let me get to some.
Hold on. I do that operation for a reason. If this fourth fight is pretty damn awesome and another one of those kind of fight of the year contenders, can this crack the sort of, top 3 or 4? But does this enter the conversation? Not just an also-ran, but truly enters the conversation of best rivalry in, I guess, at least UFC history.
Yeah, the only thing separating this rivalry from the other ones that I mentioned...
These are all title fights, by the way.
These are title fights, but the amount of care that people have about the lightweight or the light heavyweight or welterweight title is just significant. Hardcore MMA fans can stunt online that they think flyweight's the greatest thing since sliced bread. The vast majority of MMA fans disagree with you, just to be very clear about that. And that lowers the amount of stakes for how much people consider it.
Yes.
John and DC, those were not as good fights to me as these 3 have been. And even though that was just 2 anyway versus the 3. But So as fights, they're tremendous. And I think with this fourth, it will take on a very important historical significance. But the reality is people view, for example, St. Pierre and Koscheck, maybe that was so one-sided, not in the end, but, Penn and St. Pierre.
Maynard versus
Maynard-Eggert. Like, that one carries more significance because the weight class carries more significance.
Okay, so it's really, there's just not the same romantic connection is really what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, but people identify, yeah, you're right.
But I think if you're being fair, and this fourth one is great, I don't think you have much of a choice but to put it in the list of the very, very best. Now, we do have a couple of clips here. I'm not going to get to all of them, but we have a couple of clips here from Brandon Moreno speaking to our own Shaquille Majori of CBS Sports. Here's one I want to get to. Moreno says, or I should say explains, what actually went wrong in the trilogy fight where he lost. Let's hear what he has to say.
The pressure, man, the attention from the media, all my new responsibilities, like, it was hard. That part was hard. I can't lie to you. And maybe that put more noise around my head and put an extra pressure on myself. But man, I actually, obviously I saw that fight like so many times, and I was fighting really good. Just
it was competitive.
I think Deiveson again made a really good things in the middle of the fight, and maybe I can did like better things talking about myself in that fight. So that's it, man. It wasn't a close fight. Even with that, I thought I won the fight, but man, that happened when you're going to a close fight, going to the judges. Yeah. So man, so I tried to pass the page very quickly and start to think what is next for me. And
got a little bit out in front of his skis. The moment got to him here a little bit, BC.
He had an Anderson Silva-like toy collection behind him, though.
He did?
The Funkos? He was rocking out there.
He also mentioned what he's done to fix his issues. Let's hear this.
Something very similar happened with me when I fought in 2017. I remember it was my first main event for the company, and I fought in Mexico City in front of my people. I remember the responsibilities going to that fight like grow a lot, and everything changed for me. And maybe that affected me just a little bit going to that fight. And this time was the same. But I had the experience from the past, so that gave me more confidence to manage all the pressure and the new attention, all the new responsibilities. Definitely that helps. For sure is be very close with my family, be like very far from social media, don't read comments and that stuff. Man,
I like when people are honest at this level, not just I don't think he's saying this to make, to say these are the excuses of why I lost the third fight, but being honest and saying like, yeah, as champion, I got distracted. There's interviews, there's, glitz and glamour, I'm a star now. Like, that's a real thing, Luke. That's a real pressure in this game. So to see somebody own up to that, I think is interesting because it affects performance. Dude, this game, when you hear it said in anything in life, but you certainly hear it say often from the people that are in the game about MMA, it's 90% mental, Luke. Maybe in a lot of cases everything is, but there's so much.
Being a champion, like the demands on a champion, especially on fight week, are so like just watching. I've seen a couple champions up close on fight week, dude. Even the day, for example, the day was a Tuesday, I think. The day I went up to Israel Adesanya's mansion that he was renting out in New Jersey. Oh my God, man. There were like other video crews setting up over here. He's got someone monitoring exactly what he's eating, of course, but like down to the minute where he has to be, who he has to talk to. People are handing him phones, handing him this. It's crazy how much a champion has to do on fight week. And that was just Tuesday before it even ramped up to all the other things. I understand that. I've seen it. It's a beast.
The pressure almost killed GSP, right? Like he walked away from the sport.
He couldn't take it anymore. And that's GSP.
So it's like that's why I always say it. There's so many ways to lose in the sport, even compared to boxing. It's why, like, from a betting standpoint, things are crazier in MMA. But there's so many. It's anytime somebody puts on a title reign, that's 5, 6. Like anytime you get into that rare territory, dude, that's special. This is so hard to maintain just on the mental journey of it. Just, you know what I mean? And, you got to stay injury free, but like all that pressure and demand, I give a lot of respect for that. So I think the odds are basically a push on this one, right?
Pretty close to exactly the main event. Deiveson Figueiredo plus 100, so he's technically, the champ is technically the underdog. However, Moreno just minus 120.
Would it be fair to say that the fighter with the most to gain in terms of potential improvements is Moreno?
Yes.
So even though the odds are a push, I feel like Moreno should be favored here. I feel like this gives, even though he's got to go on the road in enemy territory, look, this is his opportunity to fix the wrong and show us what he's got.
If the answer to his problems is that he has to push the action, the setups have to be better and different. But if his answer is basically pressuring a guy who wants to try to avoid the fight, that's a good adjustment to have to make. It's actually harder to go back the other way where I have to stick and move, and I don't want to do that. For Figueiredo to dial it down, that was actually quite difficult to manage over the course of 25 minutes. So this is doable. This is very doable.
Let's ask the key question about those adjustments. Here's the key question. How much are we asking of Saif Saud, who has taken over the reins of the camp for Brandon Moreno because of the James Krause situation? This is asking an interim champion going into the historic quadrilogy, trying to regain his belt, to make changes. He definitely needs to make changes after the third fight. But what are you expecting with a new famous coach, smart guy? But you've got to build time and chemistry and foundation.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to go. And Saif Saud is probably the best choice given the circle. I mean, he's a good choice no matter what, but especially given the circumstances. He's going to be locked on. He's going to have done his homework. He's going to give everything to that moment. He's got a loud, in-your-face, very clear style. I know Saif is really big on game plans, sticking to the game plan. So they must have some idea of what's prepared, what their responsibilities are, and he's going to try and do everything he can to, like a dog on the Iditarod race, to crack him, to motivate him to do exactly everything that he's supposed to be doing. The question is, do they have the right tactical changes in the absence of James Krause, who,
I guess that makes a lot of sense on the odds, look, from that standpoint. It really does. With the questions.
Both guys have big power.
Has he hit a ceiling in terms of evolution?
Who?
Moreno. That's something
Moreno, I don't think so. Figueiredo, I do.
Like, he's young, but he's not super young, and he has been in war. So how old do you have that in front?
Brandon Moreno, I can pull that up here. Give me just a second.
And keep in mind that this is the smallest male weight class, so you age quicker in that.
He's 29.
Okay, I mean, obviously,
he's not even entered his full MMA
but
prime. But
Figueiredo showing us at 35 that it certainly can be done in this era to stay this dangerous and this potentially dominant. But dude, it's almost like I almost don't want to break this fight down, Luke, because I just want to enjoy it and be entertained, because they've given us a lot. I respect both of these guys and what they've given. I like that the champion gets to fight in his backyard, but this is going to be interesting. It's going to be a good night out at the fights. This should have been the main event, yes or no? True or false?
Should have been. I mean, they do it by weight, so the heavier guys are going to go higher, but this is a better fight by, at least on paper, it's a better fight.